My name is Andreas Weber, and this is my lecture in the framework of the short course Living Waters for Schumacher College in March and April 2021. And this lecture will go by the title, Being the Lust of Matter. I will try to sketch my position about the way to be the whole world in our own lived individuality, and through this to get into contact with the remainder of this whole world. And I will do this by talking about some events I have gone through, I have experienced. I will tell some stories, and I will try to make sense of them and use them as scaffolds to explain my view on the relation between inwardness and embodiment, or experience and matter. This is the outline of the talk. The chronology of chapters, and I will try to walk you through our biological experience as embodiments of an ecosystem to the experience of the world as one coherent poetic space. And all this is a very emotional process, as we all know. That's life. And to my eyes, that is the fundamental reality. So our relation to the cosmos should probably be unfolded, practiced as a love relationship. Okay, so that's the preparation. Let me start with my first little story. You see that although most of you probably will be connected with inland water bodies, I use the ocean for the illustration of my thoughts, at least at the beginning. And this is for the reason that I probably have more experience with the ocean than with sweet water, fresh water. This will change during this course at least, and this has already changed, but I had some encounters with the sea which stirred some ideas which I will share with you, and so it's connected to this. And I show you this Mediterranean picture of the Mediterranean near the city of Genoa in November, some years ago, after a strong gale, because one of the experiences I had with water happened just there, together with a colleague, a fellow artist, actually, a video artist, who also spent time there at a residency. It's not always like this, that residencies are placed like that. It's once in a lifetime situation, but it brought me to the thought I want to share, which was that we were both standing there, as we humans do, and you've done also, I think, and we were watching the waves, we were watching the moving water, we were watching the liquid muscle, rhythmically going back and forth, coming to us, crashing over the rocks, withdrawing. And we're standing there and we were smiling at one another. Actually, we were really happy. And we talked about this, and we realized in this talk that we were somehow made cheerful by this water, by the energy and by the ecstasy and by the movement and by the touch of water and stone and of water and water. And this again, I mean, this wasn't the first situation I experienced in this regard, and I imagine you have many of these situations. But at that moment, at that November day in Italy, above the Mediterranean, I realized that I was happy by what the water did, because I was watching matter in ecstasy, and I was doing this as matter. So what I was actually able to experience together with the sea was my own ecstasy and my own inward experience of being matter. And that moment, as you can imagine, for a philosopher who was thinking about how to make sense of this deep connection and fascination with water, without coming to a truly convincing final result, this thought was very rewarding, because it somehow broke a barrier and pushed me into a next room, or to a next water body, to a next ocean. And I somewhat realized that that's what we are primarily experiencing. It's being matter from the inside, because we are matter and we are experiencing this inside. So this is just what we do. And through this, we can connect with all the remainder of this planet and probably this cosmos. And this is a very emotional process. It's actually a realization of joy. To explore this a little bit more, I will read you some passages from my book, Biopoetics, which, sorry, I still didn't learn how to do it, which appeared in 2016, where I wrote it at another shore, and where I put this into words inspired by an Italian writer, Italo Calvino, who published in the 1970s a collection of poetic prose by the enigmatic title T0. And one of those prose pieces is written from the perspective of a blood cell, so from the perspective of something which inhabits the liquids of this planet. And it's a perspective written from a liquid point of view of being. You can do this as a poet, but I also think you can do this as a philosopher. And you should do this as a philosopher, because being a philosopher is being embodied as well. And this is something we are going to do in this course, meeting water by being and experiencing peace of water. Okay, I will just read you some sentences from this, and then you will get a feeling for the fascinating entanglement our experience of water has with our experience of being a body which is always a liquid universe. When we walk the seashore, the fringe of the true ocean, which lies before us and flattens the beach with the incessant caresses of its liquid weight, we involuntarily repeat this insight, Calvino's insight, that we can see from the perspective of water as water. We are drawn to the ocean's shore because of the desire for closeness with what seems to be very different to our outwardly dry and tight bodies, but which is nonetheless the central mystery: water. The ocean is not an outer object, but it is truly our inside. It is our inside that happens to be able to be touched and smelled, and which can drown us. Calvino, in taking this perspective of the blood cell in its liquid environment as point of experience, understands that our body is the way the sea thinks itself through being folded up into a confined space. He understands that our body is the way the ocean imagines itself having an outside. He knows that the ocean is the way we can experience our inside, not as a symbol, but as existential reality. The experience of the ocean is a way my body can think its inside, to which it otherwise has no access. So the ocean, or we can say general water, is not a metaphor for inwardness. It is inwardness, seen from the perspective of a body who is always both metabolism, proteins and bones, but also concern, feeling, and lust. If we connect to the ocean, we experience ourselves, but we experience that in us, inside of us, which is so deeply inside that it is completely unknown if we don't experience it as the embodied encounter with other being. So we can say, and that's what I've put on the slide here, our body is the fashion in which the ocean thinks its own enfolding into a tiny space. And the ocean is the manner in which my body experiences its own inside. When I connect to the ocean, when I connect to water, I can make contact to this inside. Okay, so I think, and this is what I try to take you, where I try to take you with me here. I think that this encounter, which is a physical encounter in our mainstream view, is always, an encounter on the plane of an inside. And I think that is what the world is about. I think that is what is experience about, and I think that is what we search for as parts of the world which is able to do this double movement, being body and being experience at the same time. I have called this dimension the poetic space, which I'm just looking if I can't make this bar go away. well, maybe not. Maybe it's not there in the recording. Sorry. So we are living in the world. We're living in a poetic space, and this poetic space is neither only inner experience nor only matter. It is embodied, felt meaning. It is constant transformation, and through this transformation, it is existential meaning. And that is the primary reason, to my eyes, why we feel so deeply connected by other beings. We feel so deeply touched by these beings because we make encounters in the poetic existential space, which is life in reality. And we know this intuitively, we might say, because we are, all we do as being alive is exploring this poetic space. So we also know what other living beings do, like this tree about to blossom and now showing the little flowers. We know this, at least we know this from an existential standpoint. We know what is happening because it is happening to us as well. And it is what is happening in this space is constant existential meaning. And so it's also constant communication, which I understand because I am a part. And as you see, it is important that in order to speak in this way, it is important that we do this leap, we make this step of accepting that what is happening is always happening on these two levels. So it's always, there's always the dimension of outward expression, which then always leads into the imagination of inner experience. So it's one coherent, dynamic reality of life meeting life, life knowing life, which to my eyes is the fundamental reality we actually all know, and we have all known all the time, even before birth, because we are this reality. As you see easily by what you hear me say, is that this is not the mainstream view. It's not the mainstream view of reality. It's not the mainstream view of life. It's not the mainstream view of biology. But I think it makes a lot of sense in an experiential way. It makes a lot of sense if you wish to get in touch with other beings, be they human or non-human. And I'd even say that it is important to, it is crucial to find this shared, coherent, poetic space in order to save is too strong a word, in order to try to heal the damage done by a world who denies that this space exists. Now let me become a little bit more specific about what is going on in this space. And I will tell you another story. You see already one, no, it's not right. You see several participants in this story, but you see one human participant who is a member of my family some years ago when he was still younger, and my son, he was still a kid then. And you see a river now. Now we wandered from the coast upwards, a coastal stream. We're still in the same region. It's still Italy. It's still the coastal area near Genoa, but now we're inland. And this stream is the stream of my little village in Italy, going down to the coast. And this stream is, among all important aspects which will occupy us in the next weeks, and among all important aspects which I will touch upon in this talk, it is also a reminder of how the poetic space operates through a continuous encounter with otherness, and in this encounter through a continuous transformation of one into the other. For me, this is it's one of the most striking and most impressive and most moving, actually, aspects of seeing water encountering earth or stone or rock, that both in this encounter become the other in some way. You see this water running down the waterbed, the riverbed, which is made of these huge boulders and smaller pebbles, which are all to some degree rounded and have become smooth, have become grinded down by the action of the water. So stone, which splinters in a ragged way from the bedrock by water, becomes round and smooth, and water becomes hard and ragged when it encounters stone. So these two characters, or these elements, we might even say, they know something of one another when they encounter one another. They somehow dance a dance together, and to some degree become the other through this. And in a way, we could enlarge that was Calvino saying, the poet talking about the ocean and ourselves. And we can say that the rock gives the water the opportunity to discover its inherent hardness, and the other way around, the water invites the rock to become soft and liquid as water. So we see that already in the physical universe, even if we don't venture as deeply as we already did when I started and talk about a poetic space, there is a tendency of meeting, of transforming one another, and to develop more and more sophisticated forms from this encounter. So we could also describe physics as a science of relationships, maybe. And this is an important aspect. The important aspect is that we can always sense or even state the presence of the imaginary dimension already in the embodied material dimension, if we really carefully, if we look carefully enough. And on the other way around, we can always see that the imaginary dimension, the felt dimension, the experiential dimension, has always matter attached to it. It always happens on bodies. And again, it's just like with us, like we are the paradigm of this happening. We are material and we are inwardness. We are water and we are rock. Our bones are made from mostly mineral, from calcium. And we are living flesh. And all this creates the experience of desiring to carry on, of wanting to encounter otherness, to get in touch, and to be able to be touched by otherness. Here again, this is now actually the famous River Dart in Great Britain. So it's close to the Schumacher College. A photo sent by a friend, who was living in the UK. And again, there's this reciprocity which generates a sort of experience of the other by encountering. Touched by water, the stone becomes soft and liquid. Broken by stone, the water becomes ragged and hard. And you see that even if we are unable to enter into the inner experience of the rock, which is caressed by the continuous movement of the river Dart, we can see something of it. We can see that the rock is changed in a way that it experiences the water, it answers the water, it mutates to something liquid. And we can experience this as well because of the power of our own inner embodied way to feel with these embodied transformations. So the path to connect to these experiences of meanings, to these experiences of opening up of an insight is really short for us. It's not complicated. And to my eyes, if we look at young children, we see that they are really natural with these attitudes, and it takes the collective effort of a whole system of education and media system to chase the instinct of being an animated part of matter in a world which is animated as well from these children. But we can get back there. We can get back there if we just allow our own ecstasy to be matter, to lead us. And then we see what comes from this. That's part of the adventure of this course at Schumacher College. To fill this with some more theory, I will try to explain what is going on from the standpoint of biology a little bit more deeply, because the science of biology has developed in a direction in which we probably can formulate a full-fledged biology of subjects and understand the science of biology as the science of the exchange of meanings between organisms as subjects. That's pretty fascinating, that we have come so far from the old tendency of biology to understand living beings simply as machines, as determined machines or computers or algorithms. It's developing into a very different direction, although this might not be the mainstream yet. One contribution to this is cognitive science, and it's particularly the science, the part of cognitive science which tries to understand how living beings are experiencing their world through the interaction with other beings, which is called inactive cognitive science. And what we know is that there is no such thing as individual atomic or autonomous cognition of the world as an object. We always have to accept that the understanding of reality from a biological standpoint is something which is created together from both or several partners in an encounter, which then gives rise to a perception. So the old classical view that an observer is some sort of camera photographing the surrounding and then representing a picture of an objective world, this is part of the past. And we know that what is the world is always done together, again as a dance in togetherness. World is embodied, the experience of the world is embodied, and these bodies form it together, which is pretty fascinating, because it also leads to regions where brains interlock, although they are not together in the same body, but they might show the same activity in the same regions when they are engaged in an encounter or in communication. This can be shown for humans. That it's rather new stuff, and which shows, as an example, that we are not alone walking a stage with things on, but we are, like my teacher Francisco Varela said, laying a path down and walking together. And one feature in this togetherness, one specific feature, is the mirror system in vertebrate brains, which you certainly have already heard about. There are mirror neurons, and these neurons are grouped together in mirror areas. And these areas, these mirror neurons and mirror systems, have a fascinating function, because they make me feel the gestures and movements of other bodies in my own body when I observe them. So if I see somebody stumbling on the street and falling, I feel this falling movement and the pain of falling down in my own body. And I cannot not feel this. It's very interesting that we are all equipped with this, and not only humans are equipped with this, other animals are too. So if we see a bodily gesture, we somehow feel the gesture in our own bodies, and we have no choice. We cannot not do this. And you see now in this picture, there's the branch and the human hand touching the branch. You see that this has far-reaching implications, because any form of living body can be mirrored in our own body. And maybe not even any form of living body, but any form of material embodiment is felt through our own bodies. And this is there's nothing mystical about this. This is just, let's say, this is just how biology works. But it opens the door to a whole world of knowing and communication. And as you see easily, this is one of the empirical underpinnings, and there are many more, of the poetic space. In a poetic space, we share our bodies because we share the existential experience of being a body. And you see that this sharing is always a communication. We always know how someone else feels. And when I say someone, I'm not only talking about humans, I'm also talking about trees and branches. So we have an access to the inwardness of other material bodies by our own embodiment. This is the brilliant red of a certain shrub close to where I live in Berlin, which every autumn I have to take several photos of. Already did this for years. And I can't help it. When the sun is shining in this nice oblique way into this foliage, I just have to do another photo. And I was happy that I found this from last autumn, because I can show it to you. And I can, with this, I want to show you that that it is very easy to understand trees. And it is very easy to see that the tree understands time and understands the sequence of the year. And the tree understands that it needs to act on the sequence of the year. And the tree expresses the warmth and energy of the summer, which it has received by a quotation of the summer in its foliage. So the sun shines from the tree right now. And we could, again, in the same vein as we did at the beginning, say that the sun, if the sun wishes to imagine itself as flesh, it imagines itself in the autumn foliage of a tree. And it imagines itself in the flower of a harebell, maybe, of a beautiful blossom. And it imagines itself in the wings of a butterfly, which co-evolves with that blossom. And lastly, is nothing else than the further differentiation of that blossom, which is now able to fly and to hover weightlessly in air. So you see that all this is a profound process of communication, and this communication is always two-sided. It's about this tree at that moment, but it's also about my own feeling. When I see this, I'm inevitably feeling my own attitude towards the slight falling of autumn, the slight dying of the light of summer. And I will somehow mirror this back into the ecosystem in which the tree stands. And I will feel this within the poetic space, which is also occupied by the tree. So the tree will know this. I might touch him, or I might just be there and be part of this shared space of existential meaning. That's just another, forgive me for showing you that. It's just another way of knowing what the ups and downs, the ecstasies, and the little dyings of embodied inwardness mean. And I am sure that the plants know this better than we do, because they don't distract themselves with other stuff like we do. And that's why we can be taught by them how it is to be alive. I think this is one of the profound revelations when we are in contact with other beings. They open the door to the poetic space, and we can enter it and experience the whole living body of the world from the inside. And this inside is breath. Breath is being born and dying, becoming larger, reaching skyward, and sinking down, embracing the earth. But I also want to tell you a little bit more specifically about another biological reality, which shows the deep entanglement of life with one another, which builds just another layer, another plane to the poetic space in which we are all connected and in which we are all taking something from any other and giving something back. And again, to my eyes, it's worthwhile to remember that by all the joy about the inward aspect of our existence, it's never allowed to take this inwardness and run away with it and somehow lock ourselves safely into a world of feeling and experience and be safe in it from the world of constant change, in which we must keep ourselves edible in order to live in togetherness with others, and in which we will ultimately be eaten by other organisms, tiny organisms probably, but we'll be part of all this. So there's no space to hide. We are still matter, we are still bodies. And through being bodies, we are part of the space of communication. And through being bodies, we can be perceived by the others in this space of communication. I called it insight as breath. And what I show you here, I'm a biologist by formation. So at least in one slide, I need to show off a little bit. So what I show you here is the hub, the pivot of breathing in animals. It's the citrate cycle, which is the center of the energy household of the cells. And I just want, basically, I want to show you only one thing. So it's a cycle, like much in bodies is a cycle. And cycle means it goes down, it goes up, and it goes down again. So cycle means that we are basically constructing ourselves, and we are basically giving ourselves away. That is what is meant by a cycle. And the interesting thing is that we all know this: food is taken in, and breathing out means CO2 is going out. There's also oxygen going in, but it's not shown here. But the interesting thing is that the food which goes into the cycle and then goes somewhere. Here maybe, fatty acid synthesis. So it goes into building your body. So the food becomes your body. And somewhere from your body, parts dissolve and become CO2 that you breathe out. That is the way breathing works. It's not like we thought, that you are filled up with fuel like a machine, and then you use it, you burn it, and that's what you breathe out, and then you need new fuel. It's totally different. So this cycle shows you, because it's this sort of strange twirl and loop. This cycle shows you that actually an organism is a sort of a loop. Reality builds on itself, and it is totally interwoven with the rest of the world. And our breath, which feeds the tree we have seen in the slide before, is part of our body. And this again is material reality, but on the other hand, it is also an imaginary reality, and it's something we can feel. So imagine yourself sitting under this tree, or standing in front of this tree, and standing in the forest and breathing. And then you're directly feeding the trees. And you're fed by them, because they breathe out oxygen. This is a pretty direct exchange. the trees are fed by your body, and you're fed by the bodies of the trees. If that is not a direct exchange, what is? But normally we don't realize this. We walk through the forest as through a nice arrangement of beautiful furniture. And philosophical tradition has it that we take an aesthetic look at these trees, or if we take an aesthetic look at all, if we don't think they are just constructions of our discourse or whatever. But we are codependent originations, to use a word from Buddhism. We enact one another, to use a word from enactive cognitive science. And through this enaction, we open up the imaginary poetic space in which we mutually realize one another. And in this space, everything is communication. So we are already communicating with other bodies from the get-go, because we cannot help to communicate, because biology as co-creation is always communication. So next time, if you feel like hugging your tree for nourishing you, just do it. It's another form of nourishment, and it will be welcomed if you don't hug too hard. Sorry, we go on here. Yeah, so we are slowly coming to the end of the talk. And with another picture, it's another one of those fantastic scenes, actually close to where I live in Berlin, in early summer, just before the gardener comes with his mower and cuts those flowers away. And I've put there, ecosystems are love processes. And this might be a worthwhile thought at the end, before I show you just one other aspect and some writing for it. And I think it has become clear what the word love has to do with ecology in what I have been saying, or with reality. And Friar Matthews will probably use the word erotic encounters in what she's going to say. And from my perspective, a relationship in which two partners or several partners realize themselves in a way that one comes to be so that the other comes to be, is a practice of love, or it's an embodied love relationship. Just think of the relationships you are having. Maybe think of your actual love relationship and ask yourself if it's that your self-realization makes the other self-realize, or if it doesn't. I think that it's in our experience, it's always fertile if it happens this way. And if we turn it around, it should be like this. Like Erich Fromm said, the psychologist, the practice of love is keeping the interest that the other can be alive or will grow in his or her aliveness. And that's what is going on in this unfolding co-creative reality in togetherness. So I would say it's a good description to say ecosystems are love processes. And as you have probably seen in the talk, this doesn't mean that you roll in the grass and everything is all right and there's no pain and no death. Just to the contrary. So we have to develop a different view of the cycle of love, which is less hedonistic and has more to do with taking responsibility for mutual flourishing. Animate cosmos. That's my last section in the talk. And this is just a hint to work I'm developing right now, which is related to animistic cultures and their way to understand poetic space as the space in which they meet the other persons inhabiting ecosystems, and in which they have to care for the fecundity and the functioning of those ecosystems. The interesting thing is that for our Western civilization, all we have been talking about is pretty strange, and to many seems still anathema. We can't do this. This is crazy. This is, do you want to go back to the Stone Age or whatever? So we're just at the beginning of rediscovering the animate paradigm in our own cultural understanding. We do. You'll encounter a lot of colleagues who are working on this through the course. But it's very reassuring that this mode of experiencing the world has been the default mode of 99% of human existence. And it still is in contemporary indigenous societies and cultures. And this picture from Australia, from an Australian cave painting, is recent. It's one of these pictures which is continuously repainted during ceremonies. So this is a link to another epoch. But at the same time, it shows that it's still the reality of human cultures on this planet. And as I'm coming to draw a close, I won't be very specific about these cultures. I will instead bombard you with a fantastic table, and which is from the last book. Actually, I gave a wrong year. There you see the quotation. It came just out of from the printer, so it's 2020. And I show you this table. We'll just go through it shortly, and then I finish. I show you this table because we can directly work with this in the course, because what we are going to do in many respects is just a way of experimenting with animistic practices. And so I've done this juxtaposition of the West. I call it the Western cognitive empire, and cultures which take serious our dwelling in the poetic space. And we'll go through the table, and you see the differences, and you'll probably find yourself your experiences in this row all the time. All elements of life are objects. So you go to the doctor, and then you realize that you're also an object, and you will be repaired or you won't. All participants of life are persons. An object consists of smaller objects. It is static and self-identical. A person consists of the process of relating. It is processual and performative. The building blocks which make an object are unrelated single entities. The process of relating, which creates persons, at the same time establishes community. So we didn't talk about this so much. We didn't talk about the aspect that to move through the poetic space, you can't be alone. You can only do this in togetherness. You can only do this following what in Kiswahili is called Ubuntu, the idea that I am because you are. And this togetherness is always communication. But in the West, objects, nature is objects, do not communicate. Any perceived communication is a projection of the human observer. So that's something you've probably heard as a reproach. But in an animistic cosmos, persons communicate about their needs and desires. This communication is the relational process which creates more persons and provides fecundity for place, for the concrete river where you are doing your work. Objects have no inner life. All persons have feelings, desires, and needs. Objects must be addressed by physical manipulation. Persons need to be addressed in a way that takes into account their desire to satisfy their needs. For the West, the world is silent. Connection and communication are impossible. We are cut off from life. For an animistic view, if a person communicates well, she is provided her place in the collective of life forever. The West builds culture in order to give ourselves life in a dead world. Culture protects us against the meaninglessness of the cosmos. Think of Hobbes, the social contract, against the bloody war of all against all, which is the state of nature. But in a culture which acknowledges that we cannot step out of poetic space, of the space of shared existential embodied meanings, we must build culture as continuation of a life-giving cosmos, because culture connects us with the meaningfulness of the cosmos. So culture is our handmade DIY version of cosmos. And it must be cosmos and allow cosmos to be fecund in order to be able to continue and to exist. And what we experience right now in the ecological disaster, climate disaster, ecological disaster, sixth extinction, is just the failure of conceiving of our culture as part of the living reality. Okay, so that was that. I hope I could make some points clear, and we are going to talk about all this again during the course. I just show you some the covers of my books, which are available in English language. This is the latest one, which is from 2020, not 2017. They are also on the on Google Classrooms in the material, and so it's easily to find. Thanks so much for bearing with me, and looking forward to see you soon when the course is starting.